Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Full Exposure with me, your host, Brian Kelly. Hey, the premise of this podcast is super simple. I invite someone I'd love to photograph and have a conversation with to my studio in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The first thing they do is sit down and come into my world of portrait photography, and we create that portrait together. Then we sit down and have an extended conversation about whatever we would like. And then we share that conversation out into the world for you to hopefully enjoy. And I have to say that I am, again, overwhelmed by the nice messages and the amount of people that are listening and commenting on this podcast and certain episodes. I'm getting lots of nice letters. Please continue to do that. That really keeps me going. This is a passion project. This isn't anything I get paid for. We don't have any sponsors. So, it really is just something that I love. I love talking to people. I love taking their portraits. And I think that a lot of interesting conversations happen around a camera and the creative process. And I love to share that with you in this platform, being a podcasting platform. Hey, I want to tell you a little bit about my next guest for this episode. It's Adeshola Makinde. I think I've known Adeshola for about 8 years. I met him when he was still in college as an intern. We had a mutual friend that I met him with, and I didn't, you meet young interns and you think, maybe you forget most of them. But Adeshola was somebody I've never forgotten. He's a hustler in town, meaning he is an artist. He's involved in many different things. Today I'd call him a multimedia artist. He's based here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he's constantly evolving. He's only 28 years old. He's raised in Chicago, in the suburbs, and he got a start in photography taking photos at parties, concerts, fashion shows, and other cultural events. Eventually, Adeshola found himself hustling to concerts all around the country to photograph some of the most famous performers in music, both on stage and backstage. And we're talking about artists like D'Angelo, Lil Wayne, Travis Scott, and Common. Those are just to name of a few of the dozens and dozens of performers he's documented. And for a lot of young photographers, you'd call that a major success and just keep doing more and more concert photography. But eventually, Adeshola found himself longing to say much more with his work, much more than just documenting live events and basically celebrity performers. So he started a small streetwear label that began experimenting with social justice messages. And now today he finds himself working in Collage. And this is really interesting. We dig into this in the podcast. But he sources images and words from vintage magazines from like the 50s, 60s, 70s, like magazines like Jet and Ebony, and even old newsletters from the Black Panther Party. And he cuts these words and photographs out of these magazines to create new collages and commentaries that tackle social issues that affect marginalized people. Now, that's a mouthful. But at the age of 28, again, Adeshola is somebody I admire. He's always evolving, changing, thinking about what's next. He cares deeply about his community and people around the country and what's happening politically and at the community level all the way up through, national politics. So we dive into that a bit, and I hope you enjoy this. It is about, we talk a little bit about photography and what inspires us as photographers, but really this podcast is for anyone who is involved in the creative process, is an entrepreneur, has to hustle, has to work through frustration. This is a great episode for you because Adeshola is grinding it out. And, success for him is a constant moving target, and he's always moving towards that target, whatever it might be. And he goes to that target through self-exploration and self-commentary, which I admire very, very much. I want to get into this, but I just want to remind everybody that this podcast is fueled by passion, purely just passion, and my businesses, which are Brian Kelly Photography and Brian Kelly Productions. As always, if you're thinking about embarking on a photo or video project, please reach out to me. I love working with companies all sizes, all different budget ranges, and I would love for you to reach out to me so we can start a dialogue. and see if we can collaborate on something together. So without further ado, here is Adeshola and I talking in our studio. And I hope you enjoy this conversation, and I'll talk to you again on the flip side of the conversation. Enjoy. Keep going.
Mic check, 1, 2. I've always wanted to say that.
There you go. I know as soon as I get on this thing and I have the headphones, there's something about putting the headphones on, my voice drops like 3 octaves.
Yeah,
and I'm like, it gets real smooth.
I've never had a deep voice. Shut up. I really want to see DMX when he comes to town.
Yeah.
Speaking of which.
Oh, yeah, you got to...
28th anniversary of It's Dark and Hell is Hot, I think is the name of the album.
Have you shot any
It's the one that
shows
Jonathan
recently?
Mannion, the cover of DMX in the Blood.
Oh, yeah.
20th anniversary of that album.
Mannion is a beast.
Yeah, he'll post like Throwback Thursday photos, and I'm like, dude.
And part of me
it's not
feels
fair.
like, I don't even know. Like Mannion was such a monster in the '90s at the explosion and all that. Has all those long relationships, but I wonder how much that world has changed. And I wonder at the time how much he was getting paid for those shoots.
Probably I feel like in the 90s, like at the height of DMX, like that was like the height of rap in the 90s is when he was out. So I feel like that was when you saw like the shiny videos and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like he was probably getting paid a lot.
I think you're
Because
probably
he was the only guy. It was him or that Chimodu guy. Are you familiar with him at all?
I don't really know him. No.
He's great. He was a
Chimoda?
Chimodu. He's a Nigerian guy. I just found out he was
Yeah.
Nigerian, but he was a photo editor for The Source.
Yeah.
So he shot everything, and he just put out a book like 2 years ago of all Tupac photos that he shot that are just wild.
Yeah, and a lot of those are like 4x5 and like
Yep.
like large format. And what I love about Mannion's studio now, when I follow his Instagram, is just the boxes and boxes of contact prints and
Yeah.
film. And his archive is like hip hop and rap from day one.
It's nuts.
And yeah, I think it's probably harder now to make money for him than it ever was back in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, because people aren't looking to hire him anymore, really, because there's so many.
Well, anyone can do, like,
Yeah.
at a certain level. That's one of my beefs with the whole industry, quite frankly, is, just because technology has democratized good photos are more possible now, but it'll never replace someone who's as skilled as Jonathan Mannion.
Not at all.
And he's just.
I mean, look at his book. Like,
Yeah.
how can you even?
No,
to
you
me,
just-
there's no one that
You
even.
just put your camera down and then you go be an accountant because you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Not the way that he did it.
No.
Yeah. What other photographers are like huge for you or were over the last few years?
I mean, guys like him, Chimodu for sure. I think Danny Clinch.
Yeah.
I like what Mark. How do you pronounce his last name?
Seliger.
I like his Oscar stuff that he does.
Yeah.
It's always blows me away.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But besides that, like, I like a lot of, like, there's this girl, she's really young. She's like 20. She's probably like 22 now. She graduated from Central St. Martin's.
What is Central St. Martin's?
It's like a huge fashion. It's like where McQueen went.
Oh.
It's where
Oh,
Ricardo
it's in
Tisci
London.
went. Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
But she studied fashion photography there, and her stuff is just super interesting.
But is she shooting fashion or is she shooting music culture?
She's shooting fashion. Music-wise, I don't know. It's not. I feel like everyone kind of transitioned to concert photography.
Yeah.
Which we can kind of talk about in the
Yeah.
thing, because that's kind of.
Well, let's just say, because we're rolling and we've got good stuff before this, but Adeshola, I just want to say thank you, man, for coming on. I don't even. How long do you think we've known each other? It hasn't been that long, but it hasn't been.
I would say since I started like hanging out in downtown Grand Rapids, so like 2010.
10. Okay, so we got 9 years.
Almost a decade.
Yeah, and you still were carrying, I noticed the moniker "Young Adeshola." Where did that get born out of? Just being a young dude around some older guys that are in business.
Pretty much. We met through Ben Gott, and they were all
I still
older.
remember the first day I met you. I was working on some project that was somehow under the umbrella of Ben's efforts, and I was at their new offices or something, and then you were just, I don't know if you interned for Benjamin Gott or not, but
Yeah,
how did you meet? How did that get going?
I met him once at the Meanwhile, and then I randomly went up to his office just to introduce myself, and I started interning for him shortly after that, working on his publication at the time, Sometime In, which he had done the first installation. We were working on doing other installations for, like, different cities.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so Young Adeshola comes from, I hung around a bunch of older guys at the time.
Yeah.
So Ben was like, I think he's like 5 or so years older than me.
But it's just enough. When you're 21, I remember looking at, 26, 27, 28-year-olds is like, I'll probably never going to be that old. I'm probably never going to be 28, you know?
For sure. So I feel like I've always kind of hung out with a wide variety of people.
Yeah.
But older, I guess. But yeah.
Well, we just wrapped your portrait, and one thing I'm always forgetting to ask the first couple of interviews that we did. I mean, do you enjoy? I know you're a photographer. I should say that Adeshola Makinde is my guest, and he is a very talented photographer, artist. You've dabbled in a lot of things: fashion, music, photography. You've had a lot of your own shows around town. Like, you're just a guy that I wanted to talk to because you're always seems to be hustling, and it's in the arts, and you're very much pursuing who you are and who you're going to become, whatever that is. And you're figuring it out, Mm-hmm. But do you like being photographed? Do you like?
I always like the end result.
Yeah.
When I'm working with a photographer as talented as yourself.
Oh, stop.
So it's not like natural to me. Like some people I think know how to move in front of a camera and all that. And I obviously don't, but yeah, I enjoy seeing photos of myself.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of people, I don't actually enjoy the other side of the camera at all, and most of it's wrapped up into whatever, I think I look old or too fat, or it's all about physicality. But what I found about portraiture, about people, is most people are like yourself. Like, they're not confident being photographed, but they will come around to that of whatever photo session I do with somebody. They will find images that they really like. It might not be the same ones that I like, but there's a whole bunch of them that they don't like, that they've just projected all their own insecurities onto, and I do that all the time. So, well, let's take it from there, because I've admired the arc that you've had around photography. You would always track me down or hit me up with a question or borrow a lens or do whatever. Mm-hmm. But you were always eager to learn, and you gravitated pretty early on towards events. I remember actually we had a pretty long discussion one time, I think around where do I start with business? Like, nobody knows anything. I didn't know anything when I started either, and I was just trying to help, some of the easier parts of the business to build are around event photography and, just covering events and giving people photography for it. So, but what was your initial, was that kind of what happened? Like, tell me, like, so what were you first shooting when you first started to be a photographer, and what were you thinking about at that point?
When I first started shooting, it was back during like the Tumblr days when that was really big.
Yeah. I still have a Tumblr, by the way.
Yeah, I think I do. I don't really remember if I deleted it or not, especially after they change their
I'm still
privacy
syncing right
things.
now. Like some of the promo photos I'll drop for your podcast, they're going up on Tumblr, dude.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't been
Yeah.
on Tumblr in like probably 2-3 years.
I also like to still use my AOL and Earthlink accounts, so a lot of dial-up. So it does take a long time to upload the images to my Tumblr. But that's more my issue than yours.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're, yeah.
Yeah, so I came up during the Tumblr days, and then that's kind of what most kids my age would say if you ask them that question in whatever realm of creativity that they do.
Yeah.
But at the time, Virgil actually was taking.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Oh, watch your toes. Name drop.
He was
Virgil.
Abloh. He was taking a lot of photos on
And
his
what does Virgil
BlackBerry.
Abloh do now? I'm sorry. Maybe he works for a company that we should know about.
He's the head designer at Louis Vuitton now.
Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
Okay, Louis Vuitton. Gotcha. Okay, so Virgil, first name basis with Virgil.
I wasn't trying to name drop like that, but
Well, when you say Virgil, no, I
yeah,
get it.
sorry. I said it. Yeah. Anyways,
There is an audience. I know. I said, hey, let's just talk like we're hanging out.
I apologize.
Yeah, there's some other people listening. Anyway,
So
sorry, I'll quit.
at the time, Virgil Abloh, he was Kanye's creative director at this moment, and he just documented his life through his BlackBerry.
Yeah.
At the time, I had a BlackBerry. I was kind of in the Stone Ages at the time because everyone had been transitioning to iPhone.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm going to stick with this. I started taking photos of my own on my BlackBerry, kind of copying what he was doing.
Yeah.
But I would document, like, when I would go to Rockies, which was a place at the time a lot of us in Grand Rapids would go out on Fridays and dance at.
Yeah. Those were huge.
Yeah.
There was 5 or 6 years where I'd already aged out of that category. However, I used to see on social and everything, like there was just amazing group of creative, like that whole dynamic of that group of people between probably 22 and 35 were killing it and going to Rockies for dance nights, and it looked like a blast.
Yeah, it was great.
So you're shooting.
So I was
you're
shooting those parties, like, kind of like
street life, street
nonchalant,
yeah.
super basic. And then from there, I transitioned into, I finally got a camera of my own, which then I started shooting Rockies every Friday. It was kind of like practice for me.
And those
kind
are
of
tough lighting conditions. It's dark.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get good photos in those. There's a lot of energy and movement, and it's dark. And you have to, there's a lot of variables. So I think as a young photographer, all of us aren't very technically proficient right at the beginning. Shooting a nightclub where everybody's dancing and sweating and drinking isn't always the most conducive to a high ratio of great photography.
No.
Although there's a lot of beautiful accidents.
Yeah, there's tons of that. And it kind of just taught me how to shoot candidly, like candid moments, which I think is what I still love the most when I shoot photography. But yeah, then I transitioned from that into music photography because Ben Edgar, who we mentioned earlier, had asked me to come and document Boxwater's time at Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
So then I was like, I went to that not really with music photography in mind. I was just going to document.
Yeah, you had a client who needed, they were doing a marketing activation at a huge festival in Chicago, and you're like, I got this.
Exactly. So,
but that sort of sparked this whole other interest of sort of behind the scenes music industry, stage performances, and whatever access you could get. Then, was that about when you started really hustling around trying to get access to shows after that experience?
After that experience, yeah, I would say it was probably after those 2 years that I did that, I did it the both years that they were the official water of the festival. I then went to South by Southwest. Some friends of mine who ran a pretty prominent rap blog at the time, illroots.com, they threw a party every year at South by Southwest called the Illmore. They collabed with this events company in the Texas area. Score More. These parties were super legendary. There's like videos of Kendrick Lamar performing earlier songs from his debut album.
Yeah, well, nobody really knew what he was going to be for sure.
Yeah, and they would have these really iconic moments, and I was like, I have to get there.
Right.
So after I saw
I remember you trying to hustle together the cash too, because I think the hard part about the music industry, just to get down there and back, is trying to like fund your trip.
Exactly.
It's hard to make money in this landscape now. We were talking about Jonathan Mannion, but like he was getting paid back then because technically a lot of people couldn't do it. You had to have really skilled film photographers to be able to do that. Everything digital upset that whole apple cart, and now every kid wants to shoot live events and do those things. So it's hard to get paid. But I remember you trying to hustle, and you're just out of college.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of extra income. And you're like, I got to get to... But you bankrolled yourself to get down there.
I did.
And then what happened after that? So, well, go through that whole process of the shooting that festival, and then what happened from there?
So then shooting that festival... shooting that festival was kind of like really important in my formative years because it just opened my eyes to like what was possible with quote unquote event photography and documenting certain cultures, spaces, and whatnot. So after that, I kind of was really like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and document music. And from there, I kind of just reached out myself to promoters.
Because there was a period of years that you were anywhere in the state of Michigan, if there was an act coming in that you were at all interested, you were trying to hustle, find the promoter, get access, get a press pass, get backstage, do whatever you could. Yeah. And that carried you for a few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did that. Like, so from the South by, which was like 2014 was the first year I went, up until 2016 when my book came out, I probably had shot like, 70 shows, more than that. The year my book came out, I shot 30 shows that year, which I kind of made it a goal to like shoot as many as possible that year. Which
Yeah, because you knew you were doing a book and an exhibition. So that's a good point to talk about, because I really think that for creatives, to reverse engineer your creativity is sometimes a huge, huge asset. So if you're going to say to yourself, as we're talking right now, it's early March 2019, and if I said, I need a book out of this subject matter by June of 2020, I'm going to start hustling. So talk about the idea of you wanting to put a book together that lit a fire that you could shoot 30 shows in between that and the book launch.
I don't know what was going through my mind at the time. It was honestly very ambitious because it wasn't even just Michigan shows. Like, I was going to Chicago, I was going to Detroit, and everywhere in between. But I think the part that made it most strenuous physically is just like, at the time when I was doing all that, I'm not getting paid for any of these shows to do them or shoot them. I'm just doing them to kind of build a portfolio and just for the love of it. But all while doing that, I'm working a full-time job where my hours are 7:30 to 4 every day. So I would like leave work at 4, go shoot a show in whatever city, drive back that night, edit photos, get them ready to post, then go back to work at 7:30.
Yeah.
And I did this for an entire year, and it was just like a lot.
But that's the grind, right?
Yeah,
that's the passion. That's
that's
when you're doing stuff that you don't need to be doing. Like you can just work your full-time job, and step that. But like, that's when you know that you have to answer the call, right? Because if you're that willing to go that many nights of driving hundreds of miles each way, no sleep, and still working, showing up the next day, like that tells you what you really want to be doing, right?
Exactly. And I think that was what pushed me. It was like, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do whatever it takes. But yeah, I guess in hindsight, I think I wouldn't change any of that. I think I would just be more intentional about like what I'm shooting, what's the end goal.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell anyone trying to.
But you don't know.
Kind
See,
of
that's
stuff.
what I talk to a lot of young people that, and music seems to be it still has a romanticism to like shooting concerts or traveling with a band or whatever, but there are no paying gigs in music photography
No.
anymore. You know, the best you could do is maybe get hired at a venue to shoot all their shows and get paid whatever they'll pay you, but it's not going to be like your full time. Like you're not going to make a good living doing that.
Yeah.
And
It's very rare.
It's hard. You know, it's hard. And even magazines now. The other job I see in the music industry that could be cool is bands now can hire people fairly affordably to go on tour with them and do BTS and do video clips and just be a content stream directly for the band. And that access would be great. That would be fun if you were of a certain age and wanted to travel and tight budgets and just get around the world or the country. It'd be awesome. But those gigs are far and few between, and you know it's kind of hard. Like, wait, you know, there's a lot of dead ends if you only want to do music photography, I think.
Yeah, and I think that was the realization for me as kind of like I've kind of like stepped back from it the past, I don't know, I'd say 6 months to a year, just kind of like reassessing my goals and aspirations, and that's why I've dabbled in fashion and now with more fine art stuff. But
all right, so you're sort of pivoting out of music, but I think it's really important to reflect on what you accomplished out of that, because you have to know I really admire you in terms of like you putting yourself out there. You had no idea. I remember in an old gallery space I used to have, you'd do little $10 print shows, and you know, you just gather your friends and you would early on and swiping square on iPads. Like I was like so amazed, you know, you're getting people are buying prints, but you were always trying to innovate just to cover your costs. But it also gave you a presence in the community that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't done that. But you know, you were hustling exhibitions. You put together a really beautiful book, like really good. I remember I showed my daughter Hannah, who happens to be here. Like I bought it at your book opening. And then I showed Hannah this. She's like, "Who's this photographer? Like, who's this person shooting all these? Like, who? Like, he lives in town." Like, pretty blown away. So you sort of forget when you're in the fight of just trying to stay in it that the impression that you're leaving is many times 100. And I'm saying this to myself because I don't always realize what I'm doing either. But it does create. There's a higher value and return on your brand than sometimes just you know, you had to make money out of a project. But tell me about that. So you know, early on you're shooting all these shows, you have a book idea, you design and release a book, you're doing exhibitions in town, even though they're sort of these smaller gatherings. But tell me about that.
yeah, so I've always been obsessed with coffee table books. I own a bunch.
You can go broke pretty quick buying those too.
Yeah,
I love them. I got tons of them.
They're the best. I feel like, and I've always felt like art is at its best when it's tangible, especially in this generation where like Instagram is such a big thing. I think there's something you can't take away from holding a book or a print or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was like a lofty idea that I had. I was like, I'm going to make a book of all the music photography that I've taken up until this point. I believe it was 5 years worth of photos at the time. And I had admired the design work of one of my good friends, Ben Biondo. He had done a lot of work for him, and his friends were the ones that ran Gaspar Gallery, who at the time were doing incredible art installations, very progressive. I think if they did that stuff now, it would still be very sought after and talked about, just because just really progressive stuff. Anyways.
Especially around here. Like, this isn't like a very deep literate art town.
Exactly. And I think they were doing stuff that I think any city.
Yeah. Like, you could pick it up and put it in some cool, cultured New York, Austin, you know, something, and it would stand up.
Mm-hmm. And they were always just like a huge inspiration to me, that like doing that kind of work here, I think, is important to do, because I think people forget that you kind of have to cultivate what you want. You can't just like always say, "Oh, this isn't happening here" or whatnot. But anyways, Ben, he was the designer for that collective, and I reached out and I was like, "Hey, would you want to work on a book together? You could do the design work, just use my photos." And we met and we designed the book. He was living in California at the time, and I was living here, and we designed the book basically via email and text for an entire year. Planned the book release, worked with the Grand Rapids Art Museum, to get it like a proper release show for it.
Yeah.
But
Which isn't easy to do, right? There's a lot of gatekeepers at museums, art museums, especially the marquee. Pick any city, and if you pick the most marquee blue chip museum in town, art museum, yeah, you gotta knock on some doors.
Yeah.
And there's a few layers of validation that you gotta get through.
Yeah, for sure. So that came through. I actually I DJ'd quite a bit in town as well, and there was a design agency, Conduit. They were doing a spot for the Gram, and they needed a DJ for a party. And I did the DJ
I've
gig.
used you on DJ stuff too for other kind of video projects. I've been working on corporate stuff. Anyway,
So
it works out, dude.
I did that gig to get the Gram for my party.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a deal we worked out. The book ended up actually being funded. I couldn't fund it myself, so I launched a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I raised enough money to print the first run.
How much
of
money
the book.
did you need? Do you mind sharing, like, just what was the big
I
money dollar number you needed?
I think it was $3,000 was the Kickstarter.
But you were going to do a shorter print run. It wasn't like you were printing 1,000 books.
No, I printed 75 books.
Yeah.
The first run.
But that tells you how beautiful it is. A beautiful book.
Thank you.
And it's printed well. It's designed well. But $3,000's a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot, and it ended up not being enough that I needed, which I learned eventually. But because there was so many other costs I didn't think about. It was like, though I got the space for free, I had to provide bar staff for the party, provide...
A lot of people come calling with the old pocketbook,
Exactly.
vacuum.
Yeah, so there's just like all these like hidden things that I didn't really think about.
Yeah.
And
But
it's
that's
just
like
part of learning,
But it applies to any business. Like, you couldn't open a gas station without like a bunch of surprises and cost overruns, or like a graphic design firm. Like, you just don't know until you're in it. And it doesn't matter at some point, because you're already down the tracks so far. You can't get off the tracks, and you're not going to back up the train.
No.
You just got to eat it and go.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I did. But it ended up being great. It's still a party that people talk about, and the turnout was incredible.
Your parties and your exhibitions are probably the only things I ever get out to. Like, literally, like, I don't go out at night hardly, because got family and kids. But like,
yeah, it always blew me away when I would see you there, because I was like, this guy's got a family. Why is he even at this ridiculous party? But you would come and you would support, and
well, it's not a party till I get there. That's the problem.
that's true.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
When's Brian coming? Everyone's checking the watch. And it's usually I'm there by 5:45, and I'm leaving by 7 p.m.
Yeah, you're in, you're out.
I'm the early draw, and then there's this whole after 10 p.m. crowd that comes later. And, I'm already in bed, but.
Yeah, so that party happened. And then I ended up getting the book into the USCA and the Grand Rapids Art Museum's like gift shop.
Yeah.
The first run actually sold out. The first run actually sold out the weekend of the release, which was great.
Yeah.
And then the second run.
Well, because you had your Kickstarter commitment.
Yeah.
A lot of people pre-bought it.
Uh-huh.
You fulfilled those orders. I bought it before. I was part of the Kickstarter package. But then you did a certain amount of overrun.
Yeah.
Just to cover, you
People
didn't
that
want to
wanted-
be like sold out and not have any books left. So you had a
Exactly.
certain amount that you could get through just for impulse sales, or 2 or 3 months down the road.
Yeah. And then along with that, There were a lot of like impulse sales, but along with just like the book, I've always been fascinated by like merchandise, like T-shirts, posters, things
Well, and that's
that come
a huge
along.
pivot because I think, from then, take it from that. I don't want to cut off the photography stuff, but
That's
like
okay.
what happened then quickly after that was that there was a rhythm of some of your own clothing designs and a photo show, and sometimes those worlds sort of overlapped sometimes. And so your interests are kind of keep layering on top of each other, which I think is very interesting. And you didn't really separate them. Like they're sort of part of like,
They were somewhat separated, but
no, in your mind, like in the creative space, what I'm saying is that these were creative sides of you, but it was all things that you were willing to play around and experiment with when you're in a landscape that no one's going to pay you to do that until they already see the product. And it's a want versus a need. They're all wants.
yeah, nothing's
Like what here's my other nugget of wisdom about, because I nearly went bankrupt owning an art gallery for 7 years, sorry. Nobody needs to hang anything from your store on the wall or wear it. They have to want it. So anyway, you already knew that, but like.
Yeah, and I think the more I create stuff, the more I realize that like exactly what you just said. Like these things aren't needs; they're wants, and you have to be able to sell something. So then from the book, I transitioned into. So I sold at the book release. I sold things like Adeshola Makinde branded T-shirts, totes, posters, lighters, pins, postcards, and the T-shirts were selling a lot. And
Not in the double XL category. I don't even know if you made them in that category.
I did not.
That's a whole demographic you missed, dude, and it's right in front of you.
Yeah, I'm all about body positivity and supporting all shapes and sizes, and I realize that now.
Except my size. I understand. There's just a point where it does hurt your brand if I'm wearing your stuff. I get it, dude. It's okay.
I don't agree, but yeah, I was selling a lot of the T-shirts, which kind of like I've always wanted to do my own clothing brand. Fashion's a huge inspiration to me.
Yeah.
Especially streetwear. Like brands like Stussy and things like that. But so yeah, it kind of like lit a light bulb in my head, and I was like, why don't I just try and start a clothing brand? And this was kind of around when the political climate was shifting from Obama's end of Obama's inauguration, end of Obama's like presidency into Donald Trump's presidency, and kind of my consciousness was being raised at that time. I think it was actually you that posted something about the documentary "I Am Not Your Negro" with James Baldwin, and you were like, "This should be watched. This should be mandatory watch for all kids in school." And I had been hearing a lot of like buzz around this documentary, and I watched it, and after leaving that documentary, I was just blown away at how I hadn't learned about James Baldwin in school.
I didn't know much about him either until, it was a huge. I find that I think we're into a really interesting pivot point because I'm imagining that you being from Chicago, and Obama being from Chicago, and he carries himself a certain way and is admired by a lot of people, but also hated by a lot of people. That the transition had to be to the current administration, and that whole election cycle had to be a bit unnerving.
Yeah.
So the political landscape's a little tenuous. You see I'm Not Your Negro by it's about James Baldwin, the author's life.
It's about, it was about primarily, he was writing a book about, because he had a relationship with Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X, and he was writing how he knew them, and he was writing about their assassinations. And it just blew me away that like, we didn't learn about this guy in school.
James Baldwin is unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Have you watched like YouTube interviews with him?
Oh yeah. After that, I was like obsessed.
Unbelievable.
And I still watch things all the time. And
I love it. Anytime I see something sort of pop up from him, even if I've seen it, like it'll be a clip on Twitter or like it'll be posted somewhere, I always watch it because the context of that time, being a black man, gay, closeted, intelligent,
so intellectual.
so intellectual.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is too when he did did a debate in England at anyway.
It was at a school, correct?
It was at a college in England.
Yeah. And I think Malcolm X was actually in that same conversation.
He might have been with him on a tour or
Yeah.
something. I can't remember. But I still need to dig into that now because all this stuff, and which will pivot us to some of your collage work, because it does have a lot of social justice themes and some of these tensions that are happening. But, you know, I grew up, quite frankly, in a very, not a very diverse school district. Not anybody's fault. That's just where I grew up. But it took me a long time to sort of get up to speed. And until really my youngest daughter has a lot of special needs. And it really was through that experience of being a father of somebody who is not like other people in just her everyday life and physicality, that I could even open a door to empathy towards, this applies to racial problems we're having. This applies to like that prism of poverty and sort of controlled systems that don't allow people out, even though they're talented and just as capable as any other human being on the planet. So anyway, talk about your pivot then during that time. I'm just saying that Baldwin, and so I'm always trying to go back. The 13th Amendment.
That documentary as well.
That documentary was incredible about, incarceration and just that system and whether everybody believes or wants to take every fact the way that the director did. It doesn't matter. It's undeniable what's happening and has been happening for 300, 400 years in our country around those issues. So anyway, but the point is that I am still not literate. I'm digging. I'm voracious now. I want to catch up. I want to be more empathetic. I want to understand more about how did we get here? Because I enjoy every day a privilege that other people don't have that aren't white. And I grew up upper middle class, got a great family unit, the parents that love me. And so I need to, that cuts you off from, like, there's other people in the world. There were other handicapped people. I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox here.
No,
for a
that's
minute.
okay.
But the point is just that it takes a real personal experience of some kind. Could be a collision with art, could be a friendship, could be something like your daughter being born that isn't a normal life, where you can open up and say, I don't have this figured out. I know there's a lot of problems. So from Baldwin to today, I think there's a lot of the same issues. These are the same narratives we've been dealing with for Malcolm X, as you mentioned, MLK, Baldwin, all those great leaders.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, take it from there.
okay.
I just trumped all over that. I didn't mean Donald trumped over.
That's okay. Yeah, I feel like, and it's funny that you mentioned even 13. Both of these things I saw you post about. So I think you're doing the diligent, intentional job of like educating yourself on things that you might not know or whatnot, and like sharing that, because it's important to use your voice in that way, which is kind of the way I took my clothing brand. I wanted to like say something.
Yeah.
It's kind of why I started to like pivot away from music photography. It's just because I've always, since that moment and before that even, I kind of wanted to have a voice that said something more than like, here's the show I went to, I documented it or whatever. And this is not like a knock towards anyone that does that. I just, for myself personally, wanted to say more.
Right. Well, I think it's a difference between holding a mirror up and saying that this is what happened and I documented it on this night, or pivoting to say, I'm going to now do something, I'm going to say something.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have a narrative that's, it's not a mirror anymore. You might hold up a mirror as a narrative, but
And
yeah.
and I still kind of do. Like, I think that's the way I am approaching my social justice type of things, is like kind of just showing people, like, because I didn't learn about James Baldwin growing up, I think it's important that since I do know about him, to talk about him, share his story, talk about those kinds of things. So,
Well, let's talk. I want to pivot from, so take me from Baldwin, that experience, and leaving behind. So in some way, there's some emptiness around just shooting, different types of musical acts that would come into town, to you longing for something else and colliding with films or reading books or whatever it might be, along with your own experience as a black man in the United States, and then a longing to create something more personal and more confrontational, perhaps, which brings me to, from your fashion, talk about that, but also the collage work you're working now, because they're very powerful pieces.
yeah, the collage work kind of started from like discovering old magazines like Ebony and Jet, which were black-owned publications started in Chicago by the Johnson Publishing Company. It recently,
Who was the first billionaire, I think?
I believe so,
First African-American black billionaire.
and it recently was sold, I believe, but the archive is actually still in Chicago. This artist that I just discovered, Theaster Gates.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
I've just been discovering his stuff and like what he's doing as far as community building.
Yeah.
And all that is just incredible to me. But
You got to hook up with Kevin Beist if you want to go meet the Astor or go hang out with him or go
Yeah.
talk to, because he's the conduit.
Totally.
He came in for Art Prize, and I spent 3 or 4 hours with the Astor. He was a juror on for the jury grand prize, so he
wow.
helped give out $200,000 for Art Prize. But anyway, I was blown away by that guy.
yeah, he's next level, the next level. So
I'll let you go in a second, but there's a piece I can't ever get out of my mind by Theaster Gates, and those were the when he hung those fire trucks in the. Have you seen those, that installation he did?
no,
Like literally fire engines were suspended, and sort of it was crazy, and I forget the exact narrative. I wouldn't do it justice by trying to put it up, but it was about, I think, like response times around, like
wow, like response time,
yeah, to certain communities and
yeah, which is a big thing in Chicago because
South Side.
yeah, the response times to those specific areas are a lot slower than
Isn't
certain
that weird
areas.
how that works out?
Yeah. So, yeah, with the collage work I've been doing, the goal behind them is to I've been educating myself by like just any of them that I get. I read them, I read the articles in them, but then I cut them up and I repurpose them into these collages. And
That was my question, because you're using like headline style fonts and things, but these are actual things, or are you recreating them sometimes, like designing them, laying them out on your own? Or are these collages that you're literally cutting out? It's not a digital collage, it's just a physical collage?
it's a physical collage.
That's cool.
So I cut up these magazines, wording, images that I kind of think that I will use in the future. And then I will sit down and just create these collages by hand. Usually I do it at the library, just spread out at a table and kind of just
Which library
work
do you like
on
to go
them.
to?
The one downtown.
Ryerson? Cool.
Yeah.
It is a cool library.
Yeah, it's really quiet. No
Yeah.
one's
there.
I feel like people don't take advantage of the
Who
library.
goes to libraries anymore?
Yeah, I feel like no one really goes, but it's where I like do most of my work now. Is like I'll go there after work and just kind of spread out, make the collages, scan them in there, edit them, and then post. But Yeah, the whole
So
like
what's the overarching narrative? Like, so what are you trying to do with this work in a social sense? Or I know you're just kind of early into this body of work, but is there an overarching umbrella theme or a guidance that you feel that's pulling you through? Like, what's the thread through this from your personal, how are you kicking down a door with these?
the theme is I want to eventually show these in museums or those kinds of spaces where like they come into contact with all walks of life, because my goal with this work is to just educate people, ask questions, spark conversations about things people might not think about. Or like yesterday I made one and it was about, it's been eerily coinciding with things happening in the news. Like I think it was yesterday when I posted one about police brutality, the news came out about those cops in Sacramento who got let off for killing a kid who had a cell phone that they mistook for a gun. And like that's been happening a lot when I post these things, like literally that day.
Well, then the next, I think it might have been the same day or the same, within another day was the one where this traffic guy got pulled over and he had his arms up in the air and this female cop just blasted him and killed him right there. And it's like the footage from a helicopter shows him with his arms up.
Yeah, I think
And
that was,
she was acquitted, is my point. And she still works for a different, now she went to a different police, precinct or something. But it's like, come on.
Yeah, and I think to kind of circle back to James Baldwin, that documentary, I'm Not Your Negro, is like, I think it was, the point of that documentary was to show us that though things may seem like they have changed, so much is still the same, because I think America as a country just we don't face problems, we just sweep them under the rug.
We've never healed.
No.
We've never healed, and we've never addressed, this latent racism is rampant now, and it only took a few dog whistles to make it all come back.
Yeah.
Like, it's scary how fast it's back.
Really quickly. And that's the goal with my work, is to spark conversation, the necessary conversation I think that needs to happen, because I think in order for things to change, you have to like talk about, it's like when people nowadays are talking about like mental health, they're like, it's important to go see a therapist. They're saying that because you have to talk about so much of the hurt that you've gone through and things like that. So I think I hope when people see my work, yes, I think it's confrontational, and I see that, but the goal.
But it's not overt. It's layered in a very smart way. It's not like hitting you with a hammer.
Yeah.
Like some of them, at first glance, they're kind of innocuous, or you might pair it with a photo of a baby or a child, and it looks kind of cute on the surface, and then the words, the way you've collaged them, hit you in a different way. It's kind of like that bomb that hits, later. But I forget where I was going with that, Adeshola. But the point, so next after that, so you're going to continue this body of work. Are you going to do a local show? Are you going to do any kind of exhibition next, or are you not quite ready to think about that yet?
Yeah, I definitely want to, and I've been thinking about it. I feel like the fine art world is a lot more tricky than...
Especially political work, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to find, I know it's hard to make money as art, and you're saying buy this thing and possess it and bring it home and put it on your wall. So it needs to be, a lot of things have to be right timing-wise for a piece to be purchased and brought home.
Exactly.
So the challenge doesn't stop you from doing it, though, even though the plan. So, I mean, that's consistent in, I think, both of our sort of art careers or the projects we're interested in. You don't really think about, oh, well, I'm not going to start this project until it's sustainable financially. It may never be, but that's not the point.
Yeah, and I think my goal is to show in these institutions so that people can view them and the proper conversations can be had. But, I mean, right now, an artist that's inspired me, the work that I'm making right now, is like someone like Barbara Kruger.
I don't know.
Or Jenny Holzer. Barbara Kruger is more so like, she's very collage based, but like heavy on words.
Okay.
You should check out her work. It's
I
super
will.
incredible. So you've definitely seen it before.
But you've been influential on me as kind of a tastemaker around music. I'll see you post about something, an album you like or something new that just dropped, and I'll go check it out, because if you like it, it doesn't mean I might like it, but I at least need to hear it, because if you're talking about it, it's in the ether of like global conversation about stuff.
Yeah, that means a lot for you to say. I don't think I'm that sort of person, but I've always been inspired by music. It's probably what inspires me the most. I can't think of the last time I've gone a day without listening to something.
Yeah.
But
Well, you were just posting about Solange, right?
yeah, that's...
And I haven't even seen it. I haven't had time to go pick it up and go
it's just
run down what she released. But there's film and music to it. Just help me out.
It's an Apple Music exclusive film. The album's on all platforms, but I'm just inspired by any artist who you can tell is just 100% has 100% control of
Commitment.
what they make.
Yeah.
And no compromise.
Right.
They're totally free and liberated in that. And you can just feel that with this body of work that she just did. Yeah. And that's why people like her and Frank Ocean are just like incredible inspirations to me.
Well, Frank Ocean is the only thing I have for my daughter, Hannah, who I'm a cool dad about. Because I turned her on to Frank Ocean, I think. Probably, mostly, maybe. But the point is, I'm sometimes up on Frank Ocean stuff before she is, and I'll text her at college, and she's like, no way, what? So it's like, how many other dads are texting Frank Ocean?
Not many. I hope to be that kind of dad someday.
I love Frank Ocean, though. Like,
yeah, I've just been making a ton of these. They're really small. They're just like 8.5 by 11. I've thought about a book for them.
yeah.
Maybe like after a year, just putting them all together. I think that would be a better way for people to consume it instead of like individual prints or whatever. But yeah, I want to
the phrasing is kind of abstract. And if you go to Adeshola Makinde.com, you can see the collages. So what is kind of what is sort of the candy to you to put words together? What sort of is the catalyst of you going, okay, this is going to pair up nice because it speaks to something that you're trying to say? Is there something you can articulate around, these are the types of words I'm putting together that have this type of result or provocation?
Right now, my method of going about collaging is like very spontaneous. Like I literally will physically spread everything out that I've cut up and just like look at it, and then kind of like look at images, then look at the wording, and just like figure out something that works. Eventually I want to start. I definitely have other ideas as far as like I'm going to be very heavy into like wording soon, and I think eventually I'll have more theme stuff. Like I'm going to do these collages and it's going to center around this issue or this topic. I think I'll get there at some point, but right now it's just very spontaneous. It's how I'm enjoying creating. I apologize. I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's great. And I also think like just as another sort of platform for thinking about revenue, and I don't think it cheapens it by me saying that a lot of these would lend themselves to wearable items, accessories. You know, they're of a size and placement and orientation where I could see them on shirts, and you always have a clever way of putting, that extra thing. I hope you don't mean like just slap them on a T-shirt, because you have so many other ways that you think about how it should lay on the clothing and how it should be viewed that I don't possess those skills. But anyway, there's other things other than a print. I mean, a book is one thing, but I think as an artist, you always have to try to think about how you can potentially monetize and support yourself. Like I don't think money is a bad thing to talk about.
No, I don't either.
I think you have to leverage without commerce, there's, the art and commerce have to collide at some point. They can't survive without.
Yeah.
Art can't survive without it. But anyway, I'm just saying I'd buy a hat.
Yeah, I think that's why I think I've transitioned from fashion into this more collage work, is because I think what I learned from doing clothing for the short period of time I did is not all of this socially conscious ideas that I have, I think, work in wearable form. But I think with you saying that, I've definitely thought about, some of these would look cool on a shirt or a tote bag or something like that. But I just want to be, collaging has forced me to be patient, because the era of magazines that I'm trying to pull from, which is typically civil rights era, like 60s, 70s, 50s, obviously. But so it's forced me to slow down and kind of just be patient with how I'm making stuff. And I think at some point I'll get there again with clothing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Right now it's kind of just it's a nice breather, and it's allowing me to be
Well, and you're
patient.
early in it, and to be fair, to ask you about this overall arc, like, how long have you been working on these collages?
Maybe 6 months.
Yeah, that's not a fair question.
No.
Because it takes a while to find that, and I don't even think you really know until, it's like when you drive down a road and, you're so far down the road, and then you kind of turn around and look back, do you only really figure out where you are, in terms of, anyway, I didn't mean to press you in a way that, I know it's early for the work, so...
Yeah, and
but I think, from what I've seen of the work so far, is you have the ability to ramp up confrontation or ramp it down, or maybe leave it abstract and leave it open to interpretation so people can ask questions. I think that's another thing that you've done really well with some of the stuff, is that, it isn't an overt statement that people read in half a second, and they don't need to engage with that anymore. Mm-hmm. It can be more of an open thing where they have an aha moment later with it, or it's open to interpretation, just like everything else in life.
Yeah, and I think, don't feel bad about asking me about such long, like, down the road stuff, just because I'm definitely someone that's thinking about that stuff. Like, I don't know, I can see, for me, like, a dream is like someone with a clothing brand asking me, like, hey, put together something for this collection. This is the theme. I think that's where I see myself going towards, or like, I don't know, I want to do something that's centered around the next selection and registering people to vote and things like that. And I have imagery for that, and I kind of want to do certain things centered around that. And I think those are broader, bigger ideas that I want to flesh out. But
No, but I think you hit an important creative point. Is I think sometimes culture in West Michigan things has a way of holding you back from speaking what you really want as an end goal, because you don't want to be perceived as arrogant or like crazy because you're too ambitious or whatever. But saying you want to design for a clothing label or short collaborations or whatever they might be, but you have to sort of speak it.
Speaking into existence.
Yeah, and I don't mean it like in a weird sense, but it's like you have to allow yourself to say, what's the goal? What's the big idea? Where do I see myself with this in 3 years? Either this time next year I won't be doing podcasts, and you'll look back that my last one was in July of 2019, or I'll still be doing them, and there'll be a consistent arc to them. Like I'll shut it down. I don't have a problem. Like, it's a failure for me on this podcast is like a pretty low bar. It doesn't cost me much to put it out. So anyway, I'm just saying that you inspire me in a way to keep going, but it helps me articulate in what's happening in my own mind, because I haven't really even thought about it yet. Mm-hmm. But I know enough of being 20 years ahead of you in a career to go, okay, you have to be able to say this is the big goal. That's the Big Apple, I'm going after.
Yeah, and I think to go back to the people that inspire me, I think in order to achieve what they achieved, you have to like think big.
Yeah.
And I think even from a mid-sized city like GR, it's fine to think that way. But I also have to like rein myself in sometimes because I sometimes want to jump to the like last step.
Yeah.
When there's so many other steps.
Artists are impatient. I talked to Brian Vanderhoek about the creative process. Once I'm into something, I can't wait to. I'm enjoying it, but I can't wait to get it finished and out. Like I'll get excited about our conversation, the portraits we took. I'm like, oh, I'd love to put that out tomorrow. Like if there's a quick return, like something about it. But it's good to have restraint. Like you don't want to go out and get a loan for $1 million for your T-shirt company that's going to be centered around the next election.
No.
That could be brutal. That could be a death sentence. So, but I think it's just opening them up about collaboration and what the goal is with these. Let people check them out on your website and see where that happens. It'll happen if you're talking about it. The opportunities are more likely to happen than not because you did say, okay, I'm going to put this out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think right now that's kind of why I'm just creating. And I think I need to, I'm starting to formulate ideas around different things I'm trying to do. But yeah, it's a part of the process, is like figuring out how to get to where you want. Like I want to be in a museum. How does that happen? And
Right.
I do feel like I'm starting over in this kind of an industry, but I'm just trying to slowly figure it out one day at a time. And I did just start, and it's like I can't expect to.
You're right. But we're all impatient.
Yeah, I'm extremely, and I think a lot of that comes from Instagram and instant gratification. I think a lot of that, it's very obvious.
Dude, in
why
my
we are the
Instagram
way we
feed,
are.
I follow nothing but really amazing photographers that I admire. And I feel like I'm not busy and I'm not really creating anything of any value because you only see the best of the best of the best of the best. And when you follow 1,000 great photographers, there's always shoots going on. I'm like, I didn't get that shoot, I didn't get that shoot. But I'm watching, so I know exactly what you're saying, where that angst of seeing curated streams lends to your own sort of impatience or wanderlust or insecurity about, well, I'm just shooting a corporate portrait today. I'm not putting out a book. I suck.
Yeah, I feel like we're all constantly comparing ourselves to people's highlight reels when that's just not realistic. I always have to remind myself that's not that person's actual reality. It's just what they're presenting.
That's cool.
Yeah. Look out
Well,
for
what
those
I think is
things.
cool is that, you're 28 and I'm 50. And that's what? 20?
25, almost
yeah,
25
help
years.
me with the math there, young man.
Almost 25 years.
Young Adeshola.
Yeah.
Help me out. But, your hustle and your grind inspires me, and that you constantly have some of your own vision that you're following, and you're not, you've never just settled into, like, you're not going to do art anymore. So I know eventually, you're already successful to me, honestly.
Thanks.
I know it doesn't feel that way, but I mean
doesn't.
it to. I know it doesn't feel that way, but you already have done 100 times more than most people that come out of art school. And I say that as somebody who knows a lot of students who've come out of art school and they're working some other job, and they're not pursuing their passion. So I would say my hat's off to you. I admire you. I like your work. I like your mind, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope this sounds okay.
It's fun. It's never going to see the light of day.
Yeah.
No, but we'll always have the portraits.
Sweet.
All right, man. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, what did you guys think? I enjoyed that conversation with Adeshola Makinde. My big takeaway from this conversation is just to keep grinding, keep pushing, and keep exploring yourself. It'd be different ways to make art. I don't think Adeshola really thought 6 to 9 months ago or a year ago he'd be working in collage. But these pieces are really powerful. You should check them out at AdesholaMakinde.com, and also his Instagram account, which is just at Adeshola Makinde, and also on Twitter. So let me know what you think. That'd be great. Hey, I started a new Facebook page for Full Exposure with Brian Kelly. If you're on Facebook, just search for Full Exposure with Brian Kelly. Hit a like, follow us, and what you'll get is a lot of video clips of our conversations, behind-the-scenes footage of photo shoots, plus all the portraits that I've created of each of my guests before we sat down for the podcast conversation. So you get to see a little of my work in that person. You get to visualize that person. One thing I love about this podcast is that all of you, even though you might not know our guest, what they look like, you can see what they look like through these portraits. And I really enjoy this process. So above all, if you enjoy this podcast, share it on Facebook, like us on and follow us on Facebook at Full Exposure with Brian Kelly, and tell a friend about it and help us grow. Have a great week, everybody.